Welcome back to Website TV. I'm Gemma Houghton, and today I'm joined by Laura Lippay, who is Head of Organic Search at Netflix, to talk to us about how the company manages its SEO across the world and also about testing in SEO and why it's important. So, hi Laura, thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Pleasure. So, Netflix, pretty sure everyone watching this will have heard of it, and it is a pretty big business all around the world. So, where do you even start with managing SEO across so many sites?
Yeah. So there's a lot we could do at Netflix for SEO, but there's two things that I'm focused on, and one of them is international. And so on January 6th of this year, we went global, and even before that, we were popping up in all these other countries. And so there was a lot to do, but it's one template, the homepage or the show pages. They're one template, and they're just localized across all these different countries. So it's a matter of getting the your technical T's crossed and I's dotted, hreflang sitemaps, geo-targeting, and then managing expectations, because we do this in subdirectories, and which is really hard when all your pages are exactly the same. So managing expectations that this may or may not work, and questions like, why is Argentina in Spanish ranking in Arabic countries? Like managing stuff like that. And it's happening, and then having good data, because now that we're everywhere, except for China, Syria, I think, and maybe North Korea. I think those are the three places we aren't. So everywhere else, it's a matter of just looking at, there's a lot of countries, right? So gathering the right data. We use Stat, and we bring in the API, and we built this dashboard that says it matches the URL pattern to what country search we're looking at. So if we're looking at Google search in whatever country, does the correct URL show up? And so in that dashboard, we have something like, it's interesting because it's not doing that well. They're all new pages with no links, and they're exactly the same. So it's going to take a little time. And what we're seeing so far is that Google is ranking the languages correctly. So we have like our Spain page ranking for all of our Spanish language searches, right? Yeah. Stuff like that. It's something like, I think 87% right now of our URLs and search results are the right language. So if I'm like searching in Spanish, I'm getting the right language. But actually the correct geo URL is like 9% correct. Yeah. So that it's really interesting, and it'll be interesting to see as we get links from localized places over time, as people start to link these, whether or not that changes, or else we come up with something completely different.
I think that though is really interesting thing to say, because so many people struggle with geo-targeting. It's clearly the problem that we always get, and I think a lot of people assume that like the big brands get it right straight away, and that you've got probably more resources, that you're well known. Well, I think a lot of people think that it's smaller, it's harder, it's everybody, but it just doesn't matter how big you are, it doesn't matter how well known you are. In terms of these things, it takes time with SEO. It doesn't happen overnight, and you really need to invest in that, and you need to build up that local presence in order to, you're not suddenly going to just rank in every search engine in the world. And
manage the expectations, because if we were to upheave everything we're doing, and because we base it on the same way we actually work with everything for us is geo-targeted or language targeted internally anyway. So that to do that for international makes sense for our URLs. But if we were to just like change our strategy, go buy all these ccTLDs or something like that, or change our strategy and just go buy language instead because that's working, that's a big process for us to change all that. And so managing expectations to say this might take a couple years is really important, because people are asking,
Of course they are,
Yeah.
And why did you, what is the reason behind the kind of subdomain strategy as opposed to ccTLDs?
Oh, that was recommended before I got there by a vendor. I think, though, that it probably made sense for us anyway, because it was an easier thing to do than ccTLDs in every single country.
Yeah. And do you, I guess you just rolled out quite recently, is it all managed centrally from the US, or do you have teams in looking after
No, it's managed centrally from the US, It's just me. And everybody else, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Developers and everyone really does play a hand in it. But in terms of SEO, we hired somebody else for our knowledge center, which is pretty cool. So I have a cohort, someone else to lament to. Yeah. But we manage it all from the US.
And obviously, we know this with SEOs, there's so much going on now with the with the search engines, they're changing stuff all the time. There's always updates. We're having to evolve to cope with mobile, to cope with all these other things that happen. So how do you kind of keep on top of that, and how do you make sure that, as a business, especially in different different markets, you can kind of be keeping up with that and doing the right things?
It's a really good question. There's certain places where I go for my news. I've learned that the places where I'm looking anyway, like Twitter, I'll always be checking Twitter. So I follow the people on Twitter who are going to be putting some of those things out. I get a lot of it from there, actually. I check Google blogs, basically. Yeah. A couple Google blogs. I check a couple of the sites every once in a while. I come to the shows and see what people have to say. But I think a big part of it, though, because it used to change a lot all the time, right? Yeah. And that was pretty exciting. And now it doesn't change as much. You just want to keep up with the right things in the right places. And I read a lot of patents. And so you can look at patents and say, like, what are they thinking about? Even if they don't push the thing out to search or to their algo, you can see what it is that they're trying to do. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's a measure of common sense that a lot of people need to kind of think about, in that you don't just go and read the SEO best practices and then go and say, you have to do all these things because this is what it says to do here. You actually have to test it and try it and kind of get in the mind of a Google engineer. If I was at Google, if I was hired at Google right now to change this algo and make it better, what would I do? What are they writing about? What are they thinking about? Microsoft does a bunch of this too, a bunch of Stanford ones. There's a lot of really good patents. And so, and they're fun. I think some people don't think that way, but I love them. Yeah. SEO by the Sea is one of my favorite sites for that. Always has been. It's like the stuff he just takes the patents and it's just like, okay, here's what's in it. And you're like, yes.
Is that Bill
Slawski?
Yeah. That's his big thing.
Yeah.
And you mentioned testing, and that's something that I think is talked about less frequently in SEO than it is in paid search or maybe advertising kind of areas. It's not something people say necessarily do as much, but clearly it's obviously just as important. What is it that you should be testing? Where do you focus those kind of efforts for SEO?
The coolest thing about Netflix is that we test everything. So it's really fun, and we've been breaking things left and right. So I get to see what happens. If we do something like put a link in a footer, we test it to make sure it doesn't hurt conversion first. If we put any content on the page, like we put a couple actor names on it recently on the show pages, and like updated the image and tested that for conversion. Definitely that would be tested for conversion first. It did better for conversion, so it went out. Or if it's flat for conversion, it goes out. And then I get to test it for SEO. And then there's all these things that we've done, like we had to recode the pages really quick. We were moving to a new platform, had to recode the pages, had to be done in a week. And so everything is gone on these show pages now. Everything. There's a title, there is, or at least when we did this, there's a little bit more now. There's a title, a sentence, and an image. That's it. And a footer. And so, but we had all this information. We had reviews, we had episode information, we had all kinds of stuff on there, and it all went away, and I was freaking out because I was like telling everybody, I'm like, this is what's going to happen. This is big, and it rolled out, and our rankings kind of went, and then they stayed the same, but for fewer keywords. So that was interesting. Yeah. We had, like, just last week or 2 weeks ago, we had some of the developers wanted to block content from a particular bot. And ended up, I think, blocking content from all bots, I guess. And no one noticed it. I didn't notice. We all didn't notice. 8 days later, I was, writing something up and looked at the cache and was like, "There's no content here. Like, what's going on?" And so I went and looked at the rankings, and yeah, they had started dropping, even though there's only a couple things in the page. So we break things a lot, and it's pretty fun to see what happens. And we all consider it a learning experience. We don't usually do it on purpose. But if we do need to test something where we need to break it, like we're going to do a test where I know we're going to hurt conversion rate. But we're just going to put it out anyway because we're going to see what it does for ranking, because usually what we want to come to is if you're going to hurt conversion rate, how much can we hurt it in what we expect to get in conversion numbers, right? And so we're trying to come up with that formula right now, which is pretty fun.
So that obviously, from the sound of that, it's very much about all the teams working together, and it's very much a culture that's a company culture, not an SEO culture, because if you're going to be trying things that are going to impact other departments and other people's kind of areas of focus, you've really got to all buy into that and be
Yeah.
prepared to work together on that. And that's not always that easy. Kind of, how does that work?
It's just so cool. So like anybody can come to the table at Netflix and say, I have an idea. And if you put it out there and we all bring it to the table and we poke holes in it and decide that we should do it, then we'll do it. You know, it could be anyone that comes up with this, and which is really fun. So you have to really feel pretty confident about it, I think, because as an SEO, you can go out there and be like, oh, well, SEO best practices say this. And you're like, yep, I think this is what's going to happen. And then you push it out there and it doesn't happen. You're called out on that. Like, hey, you said this. So you have to feel either confident about it or your hypothesis is that this may work, it may not work, but be really real about it. Be really, like I go back to common sense, really use common sense. But the interesting challenge that we have on the SEO side is that there's two camps in terms of content. And we want to have this like theatrical, simple, sleek experience on the non-member side and the member side, right? And I work on the non-member side. So that's why there's not a lot there. It's simple, and we just want you to sign in and go do what you're going to do, right?
Yeah.
So there's one camp that's like, well, the less we have on the page, the better, because then they can just convert.
Yeah. Let's not distract them, get them straight to convert.
Exactly, and that content is a distraction, exactly.
Yeah.
And the other camp that I'm on both camps actually. The other camp is that if we put more content on the page, we can engage people. Our marketing, a lot of times is saying like we're fans too, but we have nothing on the page, so it doesn't. They don't have any reason to link back to share it. Yeah. No one does. And if we had some content, we could rank for some things, right? And so. So we constantly go back and forth on everything that we want to try. Like, well, what's that going to do? What's that going to do to the page? And so we test it and find out. So it's pretty fun, and everything's like that. I mean, every project we do, member side, non-member side, everybody gets to have a say, and like, I think this, I think that, and poke holes in it before we actually test it. We redo tests a lot if we're not really sure about the outcome. It's pretty fun. It's really basically a company where we just test everything. Yeah. Like if you go to Netflix right now, you're going to be in a test, most likely, probably several.
Yeah. But that is, it's all about that's how you learn, that's how you improve things, and that's how you can kind of create a better experience overall for your users, because if you're not actually ever trying anything different, how do you know what's going to work better?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And from an SEO standpoint, you really get to see what really works on the site and what doesn't, because every site's different. So like, I worked on a site one time where we took the entire footer out, and there was a whole bunch of footer links, and we took it out and there was no effect. And but on Netflix, we put in, every time we put something in the footer, we see like one of our best results so far was a footer link, and so because there's not much else there, and so it's interesting. So being able to test your own site really lets you learn like what really works and doesn't work on this site versus other sites you've worked on.
And when it comes to the international side of it for the testing, do you kind of roll now that you're in these different markets? Do you kind of roll, if you're going to do a test, do you kind of focus on one or two markets? Do you try that more globally to see, and do you see much difference?
Yeah, we talk about that a lot. We don't usually do it by market because our US URLs are still ranking all over the place. Yeah. So if we tried to use a control that was one market and then test in another market, but the US URLs are showing up there anyway, or like if it's all, German languages, but they go back and forth and different URLs will rank sometimes. It's, that kind of ruins it. So we don't do it by country so much, but we could do it by title. So we could take a group of titles and do the test there, and then not do it on another group of titles. In terms of SEO, anyway, for A/B tests, it's different, but for SEO, yeah, we don't do it globally by market usually. Yeah.
And then you're talking before about obviously building up these new domains, these language ones, and obviously links are key to that. What is a strategy? What is the best way now to go out and get links? Because obviously there's a lot of discussion around it. You've got to be a bit clever about it now. Maybe.
Yeah, I need to have more drinks with the social team. It's the strategy.
Yeah.
I'm going to be very honest and say that I've always been not against link building, but not for it, right? I know it works, but I don't ever want to get my clients in trouble, or my company in trouble. So I've never been a proponent of it. I always want to do the hard way, right? Like get it out there, like get the word out and do your PR and your social and whatever. So we have this problem where we have Argentina, which is a Spanish homepage in Argentina. ranking in all of our Arabic language countries, which is really interesting because it's a /AR directory, which AR is the language code, the ISO code for Arabic, and it's the only connection I can make because it's Spanish. It's a totally different language. And so I'm watching this thing about a guy from Google was talking about Arabic language stuff and how they have a really hard time, and how links really work well in Arabic still because they have a hard time, with the content there. And so I went to like even places with no follow, like Wikipedia and places like that, and started adding in some links where I could find them. And I only did like 10 because it takes like a day to do that.
Yeah.
And it didn't make any difference anyway.
Okay, so don't do that.
So I stick with the plan. Like, we have these regional marketing teams and regional social teams, and they're interested. They're like, why can't we get this to rank? And I'm like, well, what you need to do is point directly to that URL.
Yeah.
So. Put it out there, get people to know about it, do the press. When we have journalists, that are asking about things, or you bring them to Netflix, like give them the URL, And so we're going about the old school way. Yeah.
Which I guess, whatever else is changing, and there are always the new things, the technology evolves, but actually the principles and what works and what people respond to stay the same.
Yeah, I mean, it's coming down to that for us for international, because we almost have all of our other technical ducks in a row. Pretty much all there. We are having some issues, like Google won't crawl the entire sitemaps, but that's and the sitemaps where the hreflangs are.
Yeah.
But I think that's because of a different problem. There's no content on the pages, so I think they're jumping out for that reason. So they don't see the match of the hreflangs, and so we get all these hreflang errors. But do hreflang errors mean that there's really a problem? And that I don't know, but. So that we could try putting hreflangs in the page, which would be the next thing. We don't want to weigh the page down, so we'll see. But the idea is to get all the technical, everything in a row, the best we can do there. I'm adding, it should be any day now, the country name to the title and the footer, just to see if that makes any difference. And if not, then it really is more of a waiting game, because links are still such a big thing, especially in the rest of the world.
Yeah. But it's definitely, it comes back again to your testing. You're trying everything, right? This hasn't worked. Let's do a little test. Let's do a little tweak and just see the difference, because little things can be big wins.
Yeah, especially when you have no content and no links, like cross-linking on your own site. You could do a little thing and be like, whoa, that has huge results. It's pretty fun. Right? Starting at real basics, like we just don't have a lot of content and we don't cross-link. You go to the Netflix homepage and on the non-member side, and you can't find the originals except for that little tiny originals link that's in the bottom and the footer that I put in there just to have some cross-linking, and that made a big difference because we don't cross-link any of those. So I get to test little things like from a very base level, which is pretty fun ever since we took the content away.
Great. And then, you're saying earlier about you really like reading about the patterns. You really like to kind of predict maybe what's going to happen. So what is your prediction for what is the thing we should all be looking at next? What's the next exciting thing? Or several, feel free.
Well, I've always had this fascination with artificial intelligence and Ray Kurzweil and what he's been looking at. And I never made the connection with search until he started working at Google. And then I was like, oh, wow, all right, I see, Google wants to be able to, I've always thought, like, one day Google's going to be able to find my keys. And I think that's really like where we're getting to, right? It's beyond this this interface that we work with all the time, where you're on mobile, you're on a screen, but you're looking at search like on all kinds of devices. We have smart refrigerators, we have smart floors, we have smart watches. We are embedding things in our bodies, and we are reverse engineering the brain. And Google is behind a lot of that, right? And so, we work in this one space where we're like Google search, in on a screen. But I think that looking at different ways you can search, like, voice is one. I mean, this is really going out there and like way in the future, but I've been thinking about it forever, and I'm pretty sure we're going there. Imagine if you have the brain reverse engineered, and you have a chip in your brain, and you just think something or feel something, and it picks that up. Like most of it's used in medical right now. Like you can move an arm, or you can help control Parkinson's, things like that. But imagine if you were using it like, oh, I wonder if the Marriott has a restaurant in it, and then like the interface comes up in your eye, in your contact or in your chip or whatever, or a voice goes off in the chip in the back of your neck and says, yes, there is a blah 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 restaurant, So I know there's so many different ways that this could potentially go with all these different pieces. And I think it's way future, but it's what I'm most excited about. And, I think about it all the time. Follow everything. Yeah. In terms of more immediate future, markup. I am really a big fan of markup, because marking up every little thing in the page, it really helps to give some context. And we did one test around markup, and I didn't see anything. So, but again, we don't have a lot of content. So we're gonna build out one page with a lot of content. I'm gonna mark it all up, everything, and see what happens. So, but I do believe in it, and I think it's important. Yeah,
and I think what is interesting for me what you're saying, it's really about looking at everything, because people can focus very much on, like, we've got to mark up everything, but if you haven't got the right content there, it's not going to work. Or we need to make sure we put href flag on, but again, if you haven't got other things lined up, it's kind of seeing the whole picture and not getting too bogged down in one area. We've got to fix that, because actually it's about the whole thing working together.
And even though I think the hardest thing though is, like, when I'm working with developers, they want to see, I especially want to give them results. Like, look, you built this, you did this, and we have results. Like, it's rewarding, and then they want to do more, right? And ideally, and I haven't seen that with markup yet, but I still believe in it. That and accessibility. Accessibility is a little bit more rewarding, because you're helping people. Yeah. And there's a lot of crossover between SEO and accessibility. So if you're putting a page out, usually what I try to look at is all three, like a little bit of markup, definitely SEO, and also the accessibility considerations.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much. Really, really great to talk to you today, Laura.
Awesome. Thank you.